This is my 1,000-gallon cloud rainforest vivarium I call Pandora. Stunning, isn't it? This tank isn't all. It's also attached by way of a glass bridge to a tree canopy vivarium above I call Orchidia. Together they house a plethora of animals, plants, and fungi, a tropical ecosystem within glass. Its purpose is to study wild ecosystems, observe how a rainforest ecosystem changes over time, with new creatures and scheduled events. But you are all right on time for the addition of my newest creatures and scheduled event. Greetings, my precious ones. Come with me. Your time has come. To bless the trees. I approached Orchidia and placed the holding tank containing the massive weaver ant colony inside. My heart beat loudly in my chest prior to opening the tank. I peeled off the first layer of tape that sealed the weaver ants inside. Okay, here goes nothing. I took a deep breath and opened the glass tank. And just like that, the weaver ant colony in all its furious glory had been unleashed. The ants swarmed out from within their leaf nest and began pouring out of the glass tank into our rainforest. The sight was both spectacular and terrifying. When the idea of this huge swarm eventually making its way down the glass bridge to Pandora came to mind, I began to question if I had made the right choice. I sure hoped so, but it was now up to the ecosystem, the giant cloud rainforest haven we built, to find its own balance in the chaos. Subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Welcome to the AC fam. Enjoy. I gasped as I watched the massive swarm of weaver ants pouring out onto the glass. It was then that I decided to name this new weaver ant colony Swarmageddon, as requested by several of you in last week's episode. It seemed highly appropriate. This was a very aggressive species that spray formic acid into you when they bite, which made opening their holding tank a painful venture. But I was just glad they were now inside and part of our rainforest story. Now I didn't know it at the time, but a crazy adventure was ahead. The weaver ants rushed out to enjoy their newfound freedom from their holding tank onto the foliage of our canopy. It was incredible seeing them making their way curiously across the main branch of our trees. As they began to calm down, I could see their true personalities come through. The ants were actually quite inquisitive and cute. Have a look. They explored the diverse array of foliage in the canopy. and climbed all over our vines. It wasn't long before the weaver ants of Swarmageddon discovered the humidifying mists and began to congregate there, treating it like their new community spa. It was quite hilarious to see. The Swarmageddon steam room was an appreciated amenity in Orcadia. What are these curious visitors? Kermit thought, as he stared up at the weaver ants. There were a variety of creatures currently inhabiting Orcadia, and I was interested to find out how the presence of Swarmageddon would affect them. Our Princess Bush Cricket, whom I've named Princess Verta, stood there quietly, eyeing the new weaver ants. I was actually afraid the weavers would totally make her a snack, as arboreal orthopterans, like her, are a favorite food for weavers. I hope not, because she was quite good at keeping the vines from growing out of control in the canopy. It turns out, the weavers would be discovering our Princess Verta soon, but their interaction would be quite surprising. But there were also other creatures I was concerned about, including these praying mantis egg sacs, which I was waiting to hatch. One of the egg sacs already had several bites taken out of it by an unknown creature living in Orcadia, but thankfully the other one was still okay and intact. For now, anyway. But seeing Swarmageddon settling into Orcadia and getting cozy so quickly was quite promising. They appeared to be quite happy with their new home, and I couldn't wait for them to start choosing a place to build their nest. You see, these ants are an amazing species that live in trees and shrubs, where they build their iconic leaf nests using silk from their larvae. As you can see from their basketball-sized leaf nest ball down there within their holding tank, eventually that leaf nest will totally dry out, and the weaver ants will need to choose among the plethora of leaves available to them here in the canopy and start nest building. My guess was they would choose to build their leaf nests in our banyan tree leaves. The banyans were abundant in leaves, and in my mind were the most ideal place to build a nest. But little did I know, Swarmageddon had their own plans in mind that would totally surprise me. Night fell in Orcadia. And Kermit stood there, still unharmed by the ants. Judging from his slit pupils, he was actually asleep. These tree frogs don't have eyelids. In the moonlight, I noticed the trails of Swarmageddon moving through the branches. Orcadia was their territory now, and I could see the ants crawling all over the glass. Workers were busy trying to catch the plethora of flying insects that emerged in the canopy at night, mostly phorid flies and gnats. Orcadia was truly abundant in prey insects. The weaver ants moved swiftly through the vines, and I wondered how long it would be before I would spot the ants nest building. I wasn't sure, but turns out it would be happening sooner than expected, and in a place I never imagined they would choose. The next morning in Pandora, I spotted a little cutie. It was Snip, a baby sunskink who had run to this spot when he saw me coming. Guess I surprised him. He licked his lips, then moved down the moss to here, where he picked up a baby roach that he had killed. Oh, guess I interrupted him during a hunt. Conspiracy theorists will say I put that roach there, but nope, that was totally his kill. And Snip carried the roach away to a higher point in the driftwood to finish it off. He proceeded to crush the roach a few times to render it immobile. He moved higher on the driftwood and began to swallow. Once swallowed, he proceeded to wipe his mouth against the wood floor. I was quite happy to see that our baby sunskink here was able to survive the rainforest. He really loved basking up on this driftwood piece. I wasn't sure how many baby sunskinks like him were frolicking the forest because his parents were no longer around. But so far, I've only seen Snip, whom I could identify from his missing tail tip. I would sometimes go days without seeing him, which made me feel like he had been eaten or died, but every time I do spot him, I smile and am proud of his survival skills in our rainforest. If he makes it to adulthood, he'll be a formidable top predator in Pandora. Speaking of which, I spotted Godzilla, our resident baby caiman, chilling out by the mossy hill next to the pond. He's more of an ambush predator, waiting in a single spot for prey to come by. Other predators, however, had recently been added to our rainforest, who had a different approach to finding prey. I scanned the leaf litter of this lower area of Pandora's floor and spotted a male cricket rummaging through the leaf litter. He could smell a female nearby and was following his antenna in search of love. It was then that I spotted an Asian bullet ant foraging the leaf litter for food. It stopped to clean itself. It was part of a colony of Asian bullet ants that I had added into our rainforest in the last episode, and I was happy to see it out hunting. There were plenty of living soil creatures here for it to catch and collect, but it was also okay with finding dead food. I loved watching it search the floor for edibles. It came across a cricket, and nope, not going to be bothering that giant. It continued to search for food as it passed the giant male cricket singing its courting song. Interesting to see that the bullet ants were not willing to attack the crickets, who were mostly around looking for food to eat as well, if not mate. But the Asian bullet ants were impressively thorough with their foraging activities. Some were digging, others picked up random things that didn't even look edible and taking them back to the nest, which was quite strange. This huge clump here looked like a piece of rotting moss, but the bullet ant seemed to find value in it, enough to take all the way home. I also noticed the Asian bullet ants weren't only exploring the soils. They were searching for food up high in the plants, as well as climbing the driftwood to find the goods. Very awesome to see. But the ants had to be thorough, as they had to contend with some serious competition. A giant trapjaw ant moved across the leaf litter with jaws wide open, also searching for food. These massive ants with the most menacing jaws, which you will see in action shortly, are also newcomers in our rainforest, and their colony was hungry now. I loved watching it move like a lioness, creeping through a field of plants, moss, and dead leaves. What a supremely impressive ant! It too stopped periodically to clean its jaws and antennae. Ants on the prowl often stop to clean themselves periodically to avoid infection from the vast array of tropical molds and organisms that could be problematic on the exoskeleton. If left unchecked, molds can be the complete death of you in the rainforest, so cleanliness was of utmost importance. I watched as the trapjaw began to look under the leaves. There were certainly a lot of creatures hiding under the leaf litter that the bullet ants were surely missing, but that the trapjaws were looking for. Like that creature there, an isopod. Before, nothing in our rainforest ate isopods, these prolific land crustaceans that eat decaying material, until we added these trapjaws. I was shocked to spot that the giant trapjaw had caught an isopod and was now carrying it back to the nest, into the mossy hill where its colony was waiting. Crazy. Now we know, these isopods aren't always completely safe. Interesting that they were on the trapjaw's menu, as the forest had a ton of them. But seeing this crazy Easter egg hunt between the bullet ants and the trapjaws made me wonder, who among the ants would be the first to find a jackpot meal? I wondered which ant was a better forager. It was time to try out an experiment. I caught a young cricket and freshly killed it, laying it down on the forest floor. How about you guys? Which ant do you think will be the first to find this cricket? Put your hypothesis in the comments, and when the experiment is over, go back to your comment and let us know if you were right. To no surprise, the very first creature to find the dying cricket was a soil creature, a mite. The soils of Pandora were simply teeming with microscopic soil fauna, a biome which took 8 months to develop. The mite began to wander the cricket's head, happy that it had scored an epic meal. A few moments later, the cricket began to bleed from the neck. That's hemolymph, the technical term for insect blood. But all this hemolymph was releasing a stench into the air, which was attracting other opportunists. A tiny snail had caught a whiff of the dying cricket and was on its way, sprinting towards the cricket. Well, sprinting in a snail way. It's getting there. Almost there. And just as it was about to have a taste of the cricket's head, suddenly, a giant trapjaw had caught scent of the cricket and stumbled upon the jackpot. Bingo! The trapjaw inspected the cricket and instantly took it. It was startled when the cricket began to flail its legs, so it started to use its jaws to further kill the cricket. Squishy hemolymph. It picked up the cricket and proceeded to drag it home. Poor snail. Maybe next time, buddy. How many of you guys guessed a trapjaw would find it? Good job if you guessed correctly. The trapjaw began to check its surroundings for the best path to drag the cricket home. As the trapjaw began to drag the cricket further, it kicked and startled the trapjaw again. Will you die already? A battle between dying cricket and giant trapjaw ant ensued. This cricket would be so much easier to transport if it wasn't moving, so it made sure to strike as many times as it took until the cricket was dead. It was kind of hilarious to see the trapjaw shooting off into the distance, and I wasn't sure if it was from the cricket kicking it, or if it was from the force of its own jaws kicking it back. Eventually, when the cricket had officially died, the trapjaw victoriously dragged its new prize all the way back home to its hungry colony, nesting in the mossy hill. But regardless of who found the food first, this leaf-littered rainforest floor had enough food for everyone, and the two species of ants seemed to be okay with sharing the hunting grounds, for now. The giant trapjaw ants were also adamant at staying clear of the giant crickets roaming the lands, which was surprising to see. I was just happy to know our two newly added species of ants were finding what they needed in the rubble. But suddenly, a movement high above caught my eye. Oh man, it was the weaver ants, traveling across the vines of Pandora. No way. I followed the trail, and it indeed led up towards the glass bridge. Swarmageddon had discovered that there was an entirely different world down here, and seeing them swarming the vines of Pandora made me extremely nervous. And then I spotted it. Brood! The weavers were transporting the brood, which only meant one thing. I continued to follow their thick trail down the vine, and what I saw left my jaw on the floor. Swarmageddon was building a leaf nest in the vine leaves. Whoa! I was speechless, watching the weavers all over their new leaf nest under construction. I guess overnight, the weaver ants had made their way down the glass bridge to Pandora and decided that these vines were the best place to build their next home. I couldn't believe my eyes. I watched, spellbound, as the ants carried brood and other random food into their new nest. The larvae were of utmost importance right now, because they would be the ones to provide the silk to cement the edges of the leaves together, while brace ants, like that strong worker there, held them in place during the spinning process. I could totally see the gluer ants, busy with their larvae glue bottles, spinning their walls of silk. What an architectural wonder to witness. I just love these ants. Now, I didn't know it yet, but the weavers had some additional plans up ahead that I would be discovering soon. But meanwhile, I spotted another weaver. A golden spiny ant was crawling down the great tree trunk, oblivious to the masses of weavers all around it. I wondered if the presence of Swarmageddon would negatively impact the spiny ants, who were also recently introduced into our rainforest in the last episode. These spiny ants also use larval silk to create nests out of collected debris, instead of leaves like the weavers, and are categorized as lesser weaver ants. These spiny ants also had a liking for the vines, and for good reason. I believe they were consuming honeydew, sweet secretions produced by plant insects that lived on the vines. In fact, I also spotted the spiny ants frolicking among the flocks of mealybugs in the asparagus ferns. I was very happy to see these ants were resourceful and finding what they needed nutritionally here in the forest. Also in the forest was this little guy. It's my first time seeing him, so he was definitely unintentionally introduced into the vivarium by way of the plants. It was a weevil. How cute! He desperately tried to climb the glass, but sadly nature hadn't equipped him with the toe pads to do so. I bet he came with one of the plants in Orcadia and crawled down to the forest floor, and is now trying to figure out how to get back up. Interesting thing about these beetles is that there are approximately 97,000 species of weevils in the world, with more species constantly being discovered. That's some serious biodiversity. They eat plants and are very vital to ecosystems. It's not every day we find a weevil in our rainforest, so I was happy to stumble upon this cool find. And then I spotted these creatures, huntsman spiders. So this was the last generation of huntsman spiders born to Lady Deathstrike, one of the adults in the forest. They used to be tiny little baby spiders, but now were on their way to becoming absolute giants, like their parents. Interesting thing is that there were 2 generations of these young huntsmen in our forest, which equated to around 800 baby huntsmen, and many thought they would simply eat everything and lead to ecosystem collapse. But in the end, I estimate there are probably only 10 to 20 of these spiders left. The rest either died to predation, cannibalism, or other such natural causes. There was plenty of prey for the spiders to eat in our rainforest. And seeing as we recently spotted Lady Deathstrike, or some other adult female, hugging another egg sac, a new generation of huntsmen was going to be released into the forest soon. Isn't nature just crazy? Up in Orcadia, Swarmageddon were busy with the transport, carrying other workers, brood, and random items down the branches, and down the glass bridge towards Pantora. The nest itself was already on its way to drying out. This is what spurred the ants to make the move, because having the nest be made with living leaves is essential for this species. You see, plants naturally release water vapor through their leaves, a process called transpiration, which naturally humidifies the inside of their nests. So gluing together living leaves was the key to an optimal nest environment. What I saw next surprised me. The ants were working on a second nest now. Wow! Check out that teamwork between Gluer Ant and Brace Ant. I love it so much. But guys, guess what? That's not all. Swarmageddon was also working on a third nest further down the vine. I was amazed at how productive they were in such a short amount of time. I guess the colony felt building 3 nests was much better than building one huge nest, considering the spacing of the vine leaves. These ants were brilliant builders. Oh dear. This ant is holding the gluing larva backwards. Okay, so maybe some of them might be new and still need to perfect their technique. But no worries, ants were also gluing from the inside. This gluing or weaving behavior is what gives these weaver ants their name, and I felt having the unique opportunity to watch these ants at work was truly a gift. I remember when I was younger and still living in Canada, dreaming of what it would be like having the chance to care for this species of ant. It was impossible at the time, seeing as these ants were native to places halfway across the world. So instead, I would watch any nature show or read any book featuring them. But the universe works in mysterious ways. And now, as the ants wandered our rainforest, traveling across the vines, transporting their brood needed to construct 3 leaf nests, I realized my impossible dream had somehow become a reality. My heart was full watching the weaver ants at work. It was a clear reminder that dreams do come true if you're crazy enough to follow them. The next day, Swarmageddon had completed their nests. Aggressive guards covered the outside of each leaf nest, ready to attack. But the other ants were much more calm now, and things seemed less urgent. It was now a matter of workers just moving into any of the 3 leaf nests. Ants were busy drinking droplets of water left behind by the morning rains. It's actually pretty cool that these leaf nests, considering they're built from just leaves and silk, are water and weatherproof. And check it out, you can actually see the inside of the nest through this silk window. This ant, cleaning some pupae, probably had the coolest view. I could see that the ants saved up some spare webbing, probably from their old nest, which they could weave into their leaf nest later. Even the weavers know to recycle old materials, so nothing goes to waste. I also see a guard there, sleeping on the job. Now I began to wonder when I would be spotting the weavers eating, and lo and behold, as I looked closer, I noticed this. A worker feeding from something at a node of the vine. Aha! I then spotted outcrops of workers stationed at every node, drinking from the sweet stuff. They were milking honeydew from scale insects and mealybugs. And what I spotted next made my heart leap into my throat. Swarmageddon had collected their very first prey item. A group of weavers had seized and killed a young cricket. How awesome! Weavers capture prey by surrounding it from all sides and stretching it out until it dies from exhaustion. But now that it was dead, the ants now had the task of carrying this huge chunk of cricket beef home. I was breathtaken watching the ants lift the cricket up one of the vine roots. What a clear feat of strength and coordination! If they dropped this thing, they would surely lose it to ants below, like the nomads, who were busy carrying one of the cricket's legs home. Let's sit back and watch the amazing process. And just like that, Swarmageddon had successfully carried the cricket into one of the nests. How cool was that? You know, a tiny part of me was concerned the weavers would be catching a ton of these crickets and completely exhausting the rainforest supply. But it turns out, they didn't. Over the next few days, it seemed the cricket population was largely unaffected. And as far as other prey animals, I laughed when I saw this. Up in Orcadia, a weaver ant was dangling, flailing its legs as it hung from the toes of Princess Verda. She, however, was not perturbed at all and couldn't feel a thing. In fact, she knew exactly how to deal with these weaver ants. If she stood still, the weaver ant would either get too tired and let go, or die from exhaustion. And lo and behold, after about 10 minutes of the weaver flailing its legs like a madman, the weaver let go, and our princess proceeded to walk up the banyan leaves with her pink toenails unharmed. Mama didn't raise no fool. She proceeded to clean her antennae. So it turns out, the weaver ants weren't such a swarmageddon after all. There were still plenty of prey insects running around, and a lot of them were used to living around the weavers. They didn't bother many of the other animals sharing their living space, and also haven't gone on to wipe out other ants in the rainforest. In fact, none of the ant species seem to be at war at the moment, not even the nomads, which were war-crazed in the last episode, but today seemed a bit more to their own. Each ant species appeared to be in its own race to growth. I guess it comes to show you that from an ecological standpoint, the key to survival doesn't always necessarily mean obliterating your competitors. In nature, oftentimes, winning the game of life means blending in, going about your business quietly, sharing territory, and staying out of each other's way. I believe the better way for most creatures to succeed in the wild is to simply outcompete any opponents for resources or food, to try to be the first to find the best food. Sometimes, success in nature is a matter of sheer luck, stumbling upon the jackpot, or finding the treasure within the junk, or evading misfortune. I shouted when I caught a cricket totally chewing up the second mantis egg sac. No! I wish I could have flicked it away, but I had to keep myself from meddling with the ecosystem at work. I knew death to some creatures also meant life for others, like this young cricket who had found a meal. So now we know who the culprit is. The second egg sac looked like it had been completely chewed out now, but the first one still looked like it had unchewed parts to it. So I decided to leave the whole thing in and pray it would still produce young mantises. The fog began to roll in, and I smiled as the weavers discovered it and began to gather round, happy they could enjoy the mists down here in Pandora as well. Come on, ladies, let's have a spa day. It was quite great to see that Swarmageddon were truly making themselves at home. Why Swarmageddon decided to ultimately nest here in Pandora and not up in Orcadia, I can only guess. But my suspicion is that they preferred the heat of Pandora, produced from the various heat lamps installed all around for the reptiles. In terms of the original leaf nest, still in the holding tank, I decided I would continue to leave it there, as I could see that there were ants still living inside. Perhaps the queens were still in there as well. I'll just leave it as is, until I stop seeing weaver ants leaving it. Overall, I couldn't wait to see how the whole biological story of our ecosystem would continue to unfold. But one thing's for sure, I was glad that it didn't end in some great ant Armageddon, and that in the end, Pandora, being the stable ecosystem that it is, had found its balance in the chaos. Now, as stable as the ecosystem was in Pandora, it seemed Arcadia, our fairly young rainforest canopy, was starting to develop its own unique ecosystem, separate from that of the rainforest floor. And I was about to discover one of its hidden players that had been living in our canopy in secret since the beginning. Looking at the foliage of the banyans in Arcadia, I couldn't believe my eyes when I spotted this. Oh no! Fire ants? No! Vote in my community tab to affect this story.